Welcome to another edition of Arizona Living. Today, I'm going to share with you my best travel tips. Stay tuned. You may be wondering, travel tips, what the heck does that have to do with Arizona? Well, when you come here to visit, A, you're going to need to book a hotel, and B, you're going to need to use an airline unless you're going to drive. Now, these tips are in no particular order. I traveled a lot for previous jobs and my current job, and myself personally, I've traveled quite a bit. So all these tips work for both business and pleasure. Now, I am not the biggest fan of travel. I much prefer to stay home, to tell you the truth. But if I do travel, I want to make it as comfortable for me as possible. So that's why these tips are going to help you. So let's talk about preparation, okay? Your trip all starts with the preparation. So number one, you're going to want to schedule an Uber. Okay, you could actually do it on the app, schedule a time. They give you a 10-minute window. You'll want to call your credit card company to tell them you're traveling, or else there's a possibility when you get to the hotel and they ask for a card for incidentals, it's not going to work. And it's embarrassing and very time consuming to call the credit card company and get them to activate the card. I highly recommend you take the time to sign up for the rewards on the hotel and airline websites that you're going to be using before you actually book your travel. Points add up quick. If you're going to start a new job where you travel a lot, you can call the hotels and ask to be put on an expedited program so that your points seriously grow and you can get free upgrades. If you're going to be traveling quite often, you may want to consider getting a TSA pre-check. I forget exactly how much it is. I think it's like $100 a year. And what that basically does, it allows you to bypass the majority of the line getting through security and you get on the express line. Highly recommend you get yourself a really good travel charger. You know, they're kind of squarish and it allows you to charge your cell phone on the road. I didn't think I needed one. Cartoon wife gave me one as a gift. I was like, what the heck is this? This thing has saved my life more than once because you won't always have the ability to plug in your phone. So highly recommend this. Speaking of phones, definitely bring extra little USB, you know, the squares you plug into the wall and then you plug in USB. Bring extras of those. Bring extra power cables. Bring a headset, both wired and Bluetooth. Now, if you're not TSA pre-check and you're gonna need to go like the rest of the jamooks, make sure your little toiletry bag and your laptop are easily accessible because you want to be quick. You don't want to be the bottleneck in this. So as soon as you get there, you take off your shoes, you take off your belt, you grab your toiletries, you grab your belt, bada bing, bada boom, and you're in and out, hopefully, if TSA doesn't bother you. Now, a little tidbit I learned. One, I never wear a baseball cap when I'm approaching TSA. For whatever reason, and I've tested this for myself, if I wore a baseball cap, they always had to pat me down. Always. If I didn't, then they left me alone. Second thing, I try to go as early as possible because chances are they're still groggy, they're tired, and they don't want to be bothered. So again, I avoid a pat down if I go extra early. I highly recommend you print your boarding pass before your trip. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh, Sam, I have my boarding pass right on my phone. Why would I need to waste a piece of paper? I'll just bring it up and show it to them. That's nice in theory, but trust me, I'm an IT guy. It doesn't always work. You're going to want to print it out. If you don't get a chance to, when you arrive, again, you're going to want to try to arrive early. So when you arrive, go to the kiosk for your airline and I'll show you what it looks like. It looks like this, and you're gonna go and put your phone under there. It'll scan the barcode, and it'll spit out a paper copy of your boarding pass. I'm telling you, this has saved the day. I also recommend on your phone, when you have the picture of your boarding pass up, take a picture of it, like an actual photo, so it's in photos. In case you lose cellular service and you don't have a paper copy with you, when you get to the gate, you can bring up the picture. Now, I'm a big guy, so I actually purchased my own seat extender. I don't always have to use it. It depends on the airline. Southwest, their seatbelts fit fine on me. American, most of the time they fit fine on me. But just in case, I don't want to be bothered. Plus, it's a little embarrassing asking for a seatbelt extension, you know? So I just rather bring my own. Be sure to pack an extra day's worth of clothes. So if you know you're gonna be away for 3 days, pack for a 4th day, just in case. You never know what'll happen. I've had situations where I had a button missing on my shirt, or a stain, or my pants were ripped and didn't realize it, and it was always good to have a spare day's worth of clothes. You're gonna wanna have a checklist of everything you're gonna put in your suitcase in advance. Because me, even being an experienced traveler, one time I forgot to pack t-shirts, and I had to go, it was in Oakland, and I had to go take an Uber to a place, Walmart in Oakland. And it was not nice. It was actually kind of scary. Speaking of scary, be sure to go through your wallet before your trip and take out any non-essential items like your Costco card, things you don't need for your trip. So you put them aside. You're doing this primarily for an inventory, a mental inventory of what you have in your wallet. Because if you lose your wallet, you're gonna need to call all those companies about whatever cards were in there. Lastly, you're gonna wanna set an alarm on your phone for when it's gonna be 24 hours before your trip, because that's when you can check in. And that can be critical, because you do not wanna get the middle seat. I will do anything to avoid getting the middle seat. That is just torture for a big guy like me. Speaking of airline seats, now let's talk about the actual plane when you're boarding. With Southwest, the way it works, I don't know if you know this, unlike traditional planes where you get to pick your seat, you don't get to pick your seat in advance. Depending on when you check in determines where you are in line to enter the plane, and then it's free game. You can sit wherever you want once you enter the plane. And so I do whatever I can to check in as soon as humanly possible so I can get in either the A group or B group. If you're in the C or D, you're screwed. You're probably getting a middle seat. But bottom line, when you're going through the aisle, I've learned you need to, I personally like a window seat because there's usually some extra room, like an inch worth of room. And I don't want to have to get up when somebody else has to pee, you know? So I've learned that as I walk down the aisle, I gotta be careful. I can't just go into any row if there's an empty window seat, because not all the rows have actual windows. And if there's no window, you lose that inch. So for me personally, again, I'm a big guy, it doesn't always apply to everybody. I like to make sure there's actually a physical window on that row for me to go in, so that extra inch makes a world of difference. Now let's talk about hotel tips. I always call the hotel before I go to bed to ask for a wake-up call. I know I have my phone that I use every day as my alarm clock, but just in case, plan B, your company, if you're traveling for business, they paid a lot of money for you to be wherever it is you're going, right? You don't want to mess up and miss a meeting or whatever. So it's critical to have a plan B. So I always call the hotel, you know, from my room, be like, hey, can you please set a wake-up call for me for 6 a.m.? Now, if I get up and I'm fully functional by 6 a.m., I will then call the front desk yet again and say, please cancel my wake-up call. You know, it helped me one time. One time out of 100 times it helped me, but it's worth doing. For this trip, I'm actually in Seattle, staying at the W, and W is owned by the Marriott, by the way. And one suggestion I have, when you check in, always ask for 2 cards. You know why? Because sometimes we want to become demagnetized. So at midnight, when you're coming home late, you don't want to have to go back downstairs, prove who you are, and go through the whole rigmarole of getting a replacement card. So always ask for 2. No one ever told me this until many years after I was already fully traveling for work, but it's not written anywhere, but it's expected that you leave a $1 tip for the maid for every day that you were at the hotel. For years, I did not do this because I didn't know about it. One day I was talking with a coworker and we were talking about travel expenses, and he was like, oh, and this is where you put your expense for the money you leave for the maid. I was like, what are you talking about? I never leave money for the maid. And he was like, you rat bastard. My mom's a maid and you're the type of person that keeps her poor. So I felt bad, but honestly, no one ever told me. Another thing, I didn't do it on this trip, but I normally ask for 2 beds. You know why? One I can sleep in and one I can eat in or just lay out my stuff. I always try to bring a garbage bag for me to put my 30 clothes in. Sometimes they'll leave a little tiny bag like this, you know, in case you want to actually use your dry cleaning service. But not all hotels offer this service, so you may end up at a hotel without a little bag, and it sucks to mix your clean clothes with your dirty clothes. Final tip, if you're traveling for business to a city you've never been and you really want to explore it, but you're not going to have time because of work, what you could do is actually schedule your flight back the next day after you're all done with your business. So if you're supposed to conclude business on Friday, you could schedule your trip back for Sunday. And then that Friday you were supposed to fly out, you could pay for that night and maybe even the Saturday night out of pocket. But you know, the company's still gonna pay for your flight back, but you get the flexibility of actually being able to enjoy a day in that city. So that concludes this special travel tips edition of Arizona Living. Be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know below, do you have any tips that I missed that maybe you could help the rest of the Zonies? Till next time!